That coin's fake. Where'd you buy it, sweetheart? eBay. The words cut through the anchor like a blade through still water. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward the woman sitting alone at the corner of the bar, her hands steady around a bottle she hadn't yet lifted to her lips. The man who'd spoken, 6 feet of former Navy SEAL muscle, sun-weathered face, eyes glassy with 3 beers too many, held a challenge coin up to the light, rotating it slowly between thick fingers. Harper Kane didn't flinch. She'd heard worse in places where words were the least dangerous thing flying through the air. The bar outside Naval Base Coronado had that particular smell every military watering hole shares. Motor oil, old leather, and the ghost of 1,000 stories nobody would ever tell in full. Friday night, 10 p.m., and the place was packed with active duty sailors, grizzled veterans, and a handful of civilians smart enough to keep their mouths shut and their opinions to themselves. She'd known the moment she walked in that this might happen. The coin slipping from her jacket pocket when she reached for her wallet wasn't an accident. Nothing about Harper Kane was ever an accident, but the timing was earlier than she'd calculated. She'd wanted another 20 minutes of invisible observation before the performance began. The universe, as always, had its own schedule. Derek Lawson, former SEAL Team 3, now working private security and drinking his way through a divorce, squinted at the coin like it might burst into flames. His buddy next to him, shorter but just as broad, leaned in close enough that Harper could smell the whiskey on his breath from 8 feet away. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with Navy Corpsman tattoos peeking from beneath rolled sleeves, stopped mid-pour to watch. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the shift in atmospheric pressure, the country song fading to nothing as someone pulled the plug. "I asked you a question." Derek took 3 steps closer, coins still held high like evidence at a trial. "Where'd you get this?" Harper's fingers adjusted on the beer bottle, not gripping tighter, just settling into a position that would have looked casual to anyone who hadn't spent years learning how hands telegraph intention. Her thumb rested along the neck, index finger extended down the glass, weight distribution perfect for stability or sudden movement. It was the kind of hold that took 10,000 repetitions to make automatic, the kind you couldn't fake even if someone told you exactly how to do it. She met Derek's eyes without lifting her chin, without changing the rhythm of her breathing. 4 count in through the nose, 4 count hold, 4 count out through the mouth. The technique had kept her alive in situations where a single hitched breath would have meant discovery, capture, or worse. Here in a bar that smelled like fried food and floor cleaner, it served a different purpose. Control the body. Control the situation. "It's mine," she said. 2 words, delivered in a tone that gave away nothing except the fact that she wasn't interested in negotiating. Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound bounced off bottles behind the bar and died somewhere near the faded recruiting posters on the wall. "Yours, right, and I'm the Queen of England." He turned to address the crowd, playing to an audience now. "You know what this is? This is a trident coin. Special warfare insignia on one side, unit number on the other. These don't just fall out of Cracker Jack boxes, sweetheart." Harper took a slow breath, 4 counts, and noticed the man in the corner booth, older than Derek by at least 2 decades, gray hair cropped close to his skull, watching her hands instead of her face. Aaron Reeves, if the faded eagle globe and anchor tattoo on his forearm was accurate. Marine Corps, probably Force Recon based on the way he sat with his back to the wall and clear sightlines to both exits. He'd noticed the grip. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't speak. Jenny Park, the bar owner, set down the glass she'd been filling and leaned forward on her elbows. Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from patching sucking chest wounds while under fire. "We don't tolerate stolen valor here. This is a safe space for real service members, not people playing dress-up with medals they didn't earn." She pointed toward the door. "You've got 2 choices. Prove that coin belongs to you, or leave before I make a phone call you won't like." The words hit the room like depth charges. Stolen valor. 2 words that could get someone hurt in a place like this, where half the patrons had lost friends to enemies they couldn't name in countries they couldn't acknowledge. Harper understood the reaction. She'd have felt the same way if the situation were reversed. If she were watching some civilian try to claim membership in a brotherhood bought with blood and years that aged you twice as fast as normal time. She let the silence stretch another 3 seconds, long enough to make them wait, short enough to avoid looking like she was scrambling for an answer. Then she reached slowly toward the coin Derek still held, palm up, fingers relaxed. "May I?" He hesitated, then dropped it into her hand like it burned him. Harper turned it over twice, feeling the weight, the slight irregularities in the milled edge where someone had dinged it against something hard. She set it on the bar top with deliberate care, heads up, the way tradition demanded. The metallic clink seemed too loud in the stillness. "My call sign," she said, voice level as a frozen lake, "is Valkyrie." The beer bottle fell from Derek's hand. It hit the edge of the bar, bounced once, and shattered against the floor in an explosion of glass and foam that nobody moved to clean up. Someone's chair scraped backward. A woman near the pool table gasped, actually gasped, like she'd been punched in the stomach and couldn't remember how to inhale properly. Derek's face went through 3 distinct colors in 5 seconds. Red to white to something grayish that suggested his brain had temporarily shut down all non-essential functions. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "That's not possible. Valkyrie's dead." The voice came from somewhere near the dartboard. Male, younger, still carrying the clip that said active duty. "Died in 2019. Everyone knows that." Harper didn't turn to acknowledge him. She was watching Derek, watching the way his hands had started to shake, watching the recognition fight with disbelief in eyes that had suddenly gone very sober, very fast. She knew what he was thinking because she'd gamed this scenario 100 times. Valkyrie wasn't just a call sign. It was a ghost story, a legend told in whisperers among the tight-knit community of operators who actually knew what that particular name meant. An operator who had gone into a situation everyone agreed was suicide and come out dragging 3 wounded teammates through hostile territory, while half the enemy's command structure burned behind her. The official story, the one civilians and most military would find if they went looking, said Valkyrie had died during exfil, killed in action, name on a classified memorial wall somewhere in a building that didn't officially exist. The unofficial story, the one told over cheap whiskey in places like this, said maybe she'd survived but disappeared, retired into deep cover so complete that even trying to find her would trigger federal attention nobody wanted. And now, here was someone claiming to be her, sitting in a bar in civilian clothes, jeans, a navy blue hoodie, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, drinking a beer she'd paid for with cash. No rank insignia, no unit patches, nothing except a coin that might be real and a name that couldn't be. Jenny reached for the phone behind the bar. "I'm calling Shore Patrol. If you're telling the truth, you won't mind waiting for them to verify. If you're lying, I'll wait." Harper's voice stayed flat, unbothered. She picked up her beer, the one she'd set down before the coin fell, and took a single sip, throat working once as she swallowed. Then she set it down and went back to breathing in counts of 4, hands resting on her thighs where everyone could see them, showing no weapon, no threat, no tension, except in the barely visible tightness around her eyes. Derek found his voice again, though it came out strangled. "You can't be Valkyrie. You can't be. That's stolen valor, lady. That's disrespecting." "I know what it is," Harper said quietly. The 3 words carried enough weight to cut through his building outrage. "I know exactly what it is. And I know that coin you're holding has a serial number you can verify if you've got the right access." "Serial number?" Derek looked down at the coin, still sitting on the bar. His hand moved toward it, stopped, moved again like he was afraid it might explode. "These coins don't have serial numbers. They're ceremonial. They're—" "Check the edge." Harper didn't move, didn't point, didn't offer to show him. "Under UV light. Bar probably has one for checking fake IDs." Jenny's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation, then something harder. She reached under the register and pulled out a small black light, the kind bouncers use to verify driver's licenses. She held it over the coin without picking it up, as if touching it might contaminate evidence. The UV glow painted the bar top purple-blue, turned everyone's teeth into Halloween props, and revealed a line of tiny characters etched into the coin's milled edge. Numbers and letters in a sequence too precise to be decorative. "That's a serial number," Aaron said from his corner booth. He still hadn't stood up, but his voice carried authority that made people listen. "Real ones, not something you can buy online or have made at a custom shop." He paused, fingers drumming once against his beer glass. "I've seen exactly 3 of those in 30 years. All of them belong to people who don't exist in any database you can access without clearance I don't have. If you've ever been doubted when you were telling the truth, hit that like button, because Harper's silence is about to become the loudest statement in this bar. Subscribe to see how a legend proves herself without saying a word." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Harper felt it in the way breathing patterns changed. in the sudden stillness that had nothing to do with wanting to hear better, and everything to do with predators recognizing something dangerous in their midst. Jenny's hand stayed on the UV light, but her eyes had gone distant, calculating. Derek backed up half a step, unconscious movement that said his survival instincts were finally catching up to his mouth. A man Harper hadn't noticed before, early 30s, fresh haircut that screamed active duty, phone already in his hand, stood up near the pool table. "I'm recording this, for evidence." His thumb moved across the screen with practiced speed. "This is going out to the group right now. Let everyone know we've got stolen valor at the anchor." Harper watched him post the video without reacting. She knew exactly where it was going, a private social media group for West Coast Special Operations veterans, a few thousand members, all of them with the kind of contacts and connections that could make someone's life very difficult very fast. The post would show her face, show the coin, show her claiming to be someone everyone believed was dead. Within 10 minutes, it would be shared to a dozen other groups. Within 20, someone with actual access to classified databases would be checking to see if this was a legitimate security breach or just another wannabe looking for glory she hadn't earned. The timing was working exactly as Harper had calculated. The leak she'd been tracking for 6 months. Someone selling classified information about special operations personnel on the dark web had listed Valkyrie's call sign 3 weeks ago, listed it as confirmed deceased, safe to use for false credentials. Whoever was selling information had access to files they shouldn't have, and they'd made the mistake of thinking dead operators couldn't bite back. Harper had needed them to see her, needed them to think she was just another fake, another civilian playing pretend so poorly that even drunk SEALs could spot the fraud. Because people who sold secrets got sloppy when they thought they'd already won, and sloppy people made mistakes, and mistakes left trails. But first, she had to survive the next 20 minutes without breaking cover completely. The video was uploaded, the group was buzzing, and Shore Patrol was probably already rolling toward this location because Jenny didn't make idle threats. You know what I think? Derek had recovered some of his composure, or at least his anger. He moved closer again, invading space Harper had carefully maintained, forcing her to either back down or respond. "I think you found that coin. Maybe stole it from someone who earned it. Maybe bought it from some scumbag who sells memorial items to frauds. And now you're sitting here disrespecting—" November 7-3, Harper's voice stayed level, but the words landed like artillery rounds. "Exfil at 0430. You want more? Get a clearance." Derek froze. The grid reference meant nothing to most people in the bar, but to him, to anyone who'd been in that particular sandbox during that particular year, it meant everything. His face went through the color changes again, this time settling on something close to horror. "How do you know that? How do you— That operation doesn't exist. You can't just—" "I know it doesn't exist," Harper said. 4-count breathing, in, hold, out, hold. "That's why I'm not saying anything else." Jenny's hand moved toward the phone again, but now there was doubt in her expression, the kind of doubt that came from hearing classified information, delivered with the casual authority of someone who had lived it. She picked up the receiver, hesitated, then dialed. "This is Jenny Park at the anchor. I need Shore Patrol at my location. Possible stolen valor situation, but—" She paused, listening. "No, ma'am, no violence. Just need verification." The weight stretched out like wire pulled too tight. Harper used the time to inventory the room again, noting who'd moved closer and who'd backed away, who was filming and who was texting, who looked ready to intervene if things turned physical, and who looked ready to help Derek if he decided to stop talking and start swinging. Aaron was still watching from his corner, one hand resting on the table, in a position that would let him stand and move in under 2 seconds, if necessary. An ally, probably, or at least someone who had learned the same lessons about when to watch and when to act. A woman near the bar, late 40s, Chief's anchor tattooed on her forearm, leaned toward Jenny and whispered something Harper couldn't hear over the sudden rush of conversation filling the space where silence had been. Jenny's eyebrows rose. She looked at Harper with new assessment, then back at the woman, then at the coin still glowing faintly under the UV light. Derek grabbed a bar stool and dragged it closer, sitting down heavily like his legs had stopped supporting his weight. "Explain something to me. If you're really Valkyrie, and I'm not saying you are, I'm not saying that at all, but if you were, why would you be sitting in a bar outside Coronado? Why would you let a coin fall where people could see it? Why would you answer when someone asked your call sign?" He leaned forward. "That's operational security failure at every level. Unless, unless I wanted someone to ask. Harper let the words sit there, watched them work through Derek's bourbon-slowed cognition. Unless I needed people to see me, to talk about me, to spread the word that someone was claiming a call sign that belongs to a ghost. You're bait, Aaron's voice from the corner, soft but certain. You're using yourself as bait. Harper didn't confirm or deny. She took another sip of beer, set it down, adjusted the bottle 30 degrees clockwise for no reason except to give her hands something to do that wasn't threatening. The door opened, letting in a wash of cool night air that smelled like ocean and exhaust. Petty Officer First Class Tom Briggs walked in wearing Shore Patrol insignia and an expression that said he'd dealt with this exact situation a dozen times and didn't expect this time to be any different. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of build that came from actual work rather than gym vanity. His uniform was pressed crisp enough to cut bread, his boots reflected the bar lights, and his eyes scanned the room with the efficiency of someone trained to assess threat levels in under 3 seconds. Those eyes landed on Harper, took in her civilian clothes and relaxed posture, then moved to Derek and the coin still sitting on the bar. "Ma'am," Briggs's voice was professionally neutral, "I'm going to need to see some identification." Harper reached slowly into her back pocket, telegraphing the movement, keeping her other hand visible on the bar, and pulled out a driver's license. California issue, her real name, an address in San Diego that existed but didn't contain anything except mail forwarding. She handed it over without comment. Briggs examined it under the bar light, comparing the photo to Harper's face. "This doesn't show military affiliation. Do you have a common access card? Military ID of any kind?" "No." "No?" Briggs's tone sharpened slightly. "You're claiming to be military personnel without any form of military identification?" "I'm not claiming to be military personnel." Harper's voice stayed absolutely level. "I answered a question about my call sign, that's all." "A call sign," Briggs repeated slowly, "belonging to an operator who doesn't exist in any public database. An operator who, according to every record I could access if I looked, died in action 6 years ago." He set the driver's license on the bar next to the coin. "Ma'am, I need you to understand how serious this is. Stolen valor is a federal offense. If you're impersonating, I'm not impersonating anyone." Harper met his eyes without blinking. "I'm sitting in a bar, drinking a beer I paid for, minding my business until someone picked up something that belongs to me and decided to make it everyone's problem." Derek made a sound halfway between a laugh and a choke. "Oh, that's rich. You drop a coin you clearly stole, claim a call sign that belongs to a legend, and now you're the victim? That's..." He stopped himself from finishing with a word that would have gotten him thrown out. "That's nonsense. Complete nonsense." "Is it?" Harper tilted her head slightly, a gesture that in different lighting might have looked curious or confused. Here, it just looked calculated. "You checked the serial number. You heard me reference an operation that doesn't exist. What part sounds like nonsense?" "The part where you're still breathing," another voice chimed in from near the door. A man who looked too young to be a veteran of anything, except maybe high school, approached with his phone held high, recording. "Valkyrie went out hard. Everyone knows the story. She held off an entire platoon while her team extracted, took 3 rounds, still made it to the exfil point before..." "Before what?" Harper's voice cut through his retelling. "Before what happened? You going to tell me how I died? You going to explain to me exactly what happened in those last 30 seconds? The young man's mouth worked silently. Around the bar, conversations died again as people realized what she'd just said. How I died. Present tense awareness of a past event. The kind of phrasing that either meant she was completely delusional or she was telling a truth nobody wanted to believe. Briggs pulled out his radio. "I need to escalate this. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to remain here while I contact..." "Federal Command." Harper said it for him. "You're going to call someone with clearance high enough to verify my status without actually saying anything classified over an open channel. That's going to take about 15 minutes, maybe 20 if they're being thorough." Briggs stared at her. "How do you know?" "Because that's protocol for exactly this situation." Harper's voice carried the weight of someone who had written protocols, not just followed them. "Someone claims a protected identity in public. You can't verify or deny without clearance. So you escalate up the chain until you find someone who can access the files without committing a security violation. Standard procedure." The room had gone so quiet that Harper could hear the ice machine cycling in the back. could hear someone's phone buzzing with incoming messages, could hear Aaron Reeves shifting his weight in the booth and the leather creaking under him. Briggs spoke into his radio in codes Harper recognized but didn't react to, requesting a senior officer with specific clearance levels, giving a location and situation summary that boiled down to, "We might have a real problem here." Jenny refilled Harper's beer without asking, set it down, and walked to the far end of the bar like distance might provide clarity. Derek hadn't moved from his stool, but his hands had curled into fists on his thighs, knuckles white with tension that had nowhere to go. The man with the phone was still recording, but he'd lowered it slightly, uncertainty creeping into his expression as he realized this wasn't playing out like the stolen valor incidents he'd seen online. "You're not denying it," Derek said quietly. "You're not saying I'm not Valkyrie. You've got the wrong person. You're just sitting there like," his voice caught, "like you've got nothing to prove. Like you're waiting for us to catch up." Harper took a drink from the fresh beer. 4-count breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Her fingers maintained that same casual grip on the bottle, that same unconscious positioning that Aaron kept glancing at with increasing certainty. She didn't answer Derek's observation because it wasn't a question, and questions were the only things that required responses. A woman approached from the pool table area, older, with gray streaking through black hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had Sergeant Major written all over her, the posture, the way her eyes tracked movement, the efficiency of every gesture. "I served with someone who knew Valkyrie, not personally, but he was part of the logistics chain for that operation. He said," she paused, choosing words carefully. "He said the operator who went in was smaller than expected, 5'7", maybe 5'8". Light build, but efficient. Said command made a point of saying physical presence wasn't the metric that mattered." Harper looked at her properly for the first time, meeting eyes that had seen their share of situations where the official story and the real story lived in different zip codes. The woman was offering information, but she was also asking a question without putting it into words. Harper gave a slight nod, acknowledgement, not confirmation, and watched something shift in the Sergeant Major's expression. "Those runes," the woman continued, gesturing vaguely toward Harper's arm without actually looking at it. "The pattern they use. I've seen it exactly once before, in a photograph that shouldn't have existed. A photograph someone took during casualty collection and got reprimanded for because nobody's supposed to have proof that particular operation happened." She crossed her arms. "If you're wearing ink that matches that pattern, either you have access to classified imagery and a very good tattoo artist, or it's real." Aaron finally stood up from his booth, moving with the careful control of someone whose back or knees or both had permanent reminders of hard years. He approached the bar, stopped a respectful distance away, and addressed Briggs instead of Harper. "Petty officer, I suggest we all take a breath and wait for your senior officer to arrive before this goes somewhere nobody wants. This woman hasn't threatened anyone, hasn't broken any laws that I can see, and based on what I'm observing, I'd bet my retirement that whatever you find out in the next 15 minutes is going to make everyone in this bar wish they'd kept their mouths shut and their phones down." "Are you saying you believe her?" Derek's voice cracked on the last word. "I'm saying," Aaron replied with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to recruits, "that I've been around long enough to know when someone's lying about their service. Liars get details wrong. They puff up, they elaborate, they tell you stories about being heroes. They don't sit quiet and give you grid coordinates for operations that don't exist. They don't breathe like they're managing combat stress in real time. And they sure don't have muscle memory in their hands that you can't fake no matter how many YouTube videos you watch. Do you think Harper can prove herself without breaking protocol? Drop a comment with your theory, and smash that subscribe button, because what happens next will rewrite everything you thought you knew about Valkyrie." Harper didn't react to Aaron's assessment, except to shift her weight slightly on the bar stool, adjusting balance in a way that would have looked like fidgeting on anyone else. On her, it looked like someone maintaining awareness of exits and angles, and who stood where. Briggs's radio crackled with response. "Arrival time, 10 minutes, clear the area around the subject but don't engage further. Standard holding pattern while someone with actual answers drove toward this bar at probably illegal speeds." Derek stood up suddenly enough that his stool scraped across the floor with a sound like nails on slate. "This is insane. We're all standing here acting like this is normal, like it's reasonable for someone to walk into a bar and claim to be a dead operator and expect us to just..." He reached toward Harper, Not aggressive exactly, but not gentle either, going for her shoulder like he intended to physically turn her toward him and demand better answers. Harper moved without appearing to move at all, a subtle shift that put the bar stool between them and left Derek grabbing air 6 inches from where her shoulder had been. Her expression didn't change, her breathing didn't change, but something in the quality of her stillness changed, became the kind of alert that preceded action by fractions of a second. "Don't," Aaron's voice carried warning. "Don't touch her. Don't crowd her. Don't do anything except step back and let the process work." Derek pulled his hand back like he'd been burned, awareness finally penetrating through alcohol, and adrenaline that he had almost made a mistake with consequences he couldn't predict. He retreated to his original position near the pool table, hands shoved in his pockets, watching Harper with the kind of intensity usually reserved for threats you couldn't quite identify. The door opened again. A man in his 60s walked in, civilian clothes but military bearings so ingrained that he might as well have been wearing a uniform. He scanned the bar, located Harper in under 2 seconds, and approached with the measured pace of someone who'd made a career out of staying calm while everyone else panicked. Commander Nathan Cross, Naval Intelligence, though Harper doubted anyone here except Briggs knew that yet. Cross looked at the coin under the UV light, looked at Harper's driver's license, looked at Harper herself with eyes that had reviewed more classified files than most people knew existed. Then he pulled out a tablet from the messenger bag slung over his shoulder, unlocked it with retinal scan and password combination, and spent 90 seconds reading something nobody else could see. The bar held its breath. Harper counted heartbeats. Hers stayed steady at 58 per minute, the rhythm she'd trained herself to maintain under stress. Cross's expression gave away nothing as he read, but his body language told a story if you knew how to read it. The slight tension in his shoulders relaxed, his jaw unclenched. When he looked up from the tablet, something in his face had shifted from skeptical to carefully neutral. "Petty Officer Briggs." Cross's voice carried command authority that made Briggs straighten unconsciously. "Clear this area. I need everyone not essential to back up 15 feet. Anyone recording needs to stop immediately and surrender devices for security review." "Sir?" Briggs's confusion was obvious but controlled. "I don't have authority to confiscate civilian property without—" "You do now." Cross pulled credentials from his pocket, the kind that came with security clearance levels most people didn't have words for. "This is a federal matter involving classified personnel. Every person who recorded or photographed this woman in the last 30 minutes has potentially committed an operational security violation. Devices will be returned after review, but they are evidence in an ongoing investigation as of right now." The mood shifted from tense to something closer to panic. Phones came out of pockets not to record but to delete. People backing away from Harper like proximity might make them accomplices to something they didn't understand. Derek had gone pale, his earlier certainty replaced by the dawning horror of someone who'd just realized they'd grabbed a live grenade and couldn't remember where they'd set it down. Cross turned to Harper, and for the first time since walking in, he addressed her directly. "Ma'am, I need you to remain here while I verify some additional details. I apologize for the inconvenience." "No inconvenience, sir." Harper's voice stayed level. "I knew what I was doing when I walked in here." "Yes," Cross said quietly, "so only she and maybe Briggs could hear?" "I expect you did." He stepped away, phone to his ear, speaking in codes that confirmed what Harper had already known. Her file was still active, her status was still protected, and about a dozen people in this bar had just stumbled into a security situation that would require paperwork nobody wanted to file and interviews nobody wanted to give. The fragments of Harper's careful plan were clicking into place. The video had been shared. The information was spreading through exactly the channels she'd predicted, and somewhere out there, someone who had been selling secrets about dead operators was about to realize their latest mark was very much alive and very interested in having a conversation about where classified information was going and who was paying for it. But first she had to get through the next phase, the reveal that would either confirm her identity beyond doubt or expose her as someone running an operation so illegal that even thinking about the consequences made career officers nervous. Jenny Park walked back to where Harper sat, moving with the careful deliberation of someone approaching a situation she'd radically misjudged. She set a fresh napkin down, then a glass of water Harper hadn't asked for. "If I was wrong," she started, voice lower than before, stripped of the earlier authority. "You weren't wrong to protect your people." Harper's response came quick enough to cut off the apology. "You did exactly what you should have done. Stolen valor is real, and it's disgusting. You saw something that looked wrong, you acted. That's the right call every time. Jenny's eyes glistened slightly, though she blinked it away before anything could fall. She nodded once, sharp and military, then moved back to her station behind the bar where she could pretend to be busy while actually watching everything unfold. Around them, Briggs was collecting phones with the resigned efficiency of someone doing paperwork nobody would ever read, issuing receipts, explaining that devices would be returned within 72 hours pending security review. Derek hadn't moved from his position near the pool table. His hands had migrated from his pockets to crossed over his chest, then dropped to his sides where they hung useless and uncertain. He was staring at Harper with an expression that cycled between horror and something that might have been awe, trying to reconcile the quiet woman at the bar with the legend he had been told about in whispers over cheap drinks in a dozen bars just like this one. Cross finished his phone call and returned to Harper's position, tablet still glowing in his hand. He glanced at Briggs, jerked his chin toward the door in silent command that sent the petty officer outside to establish a perimeter. Then he looked at Harper with the kind of assessment that went beyond what eyes could see, reading posture and breathing, and the 1,000 tiny signals that separated people who'd done things from people who had only imagined them. "You're making this complicated," he said quietly. It was already complicated. Harper took a drink from the water Jenny had left. "I'm just bringing it into the light where we can deal with it." By using yourself as bait in a public bar, Cross didn't phrase it as a question. By deliberately triggering exactly this response, by letting your call sign get into civilian conversation, where anyone with a phone can spread it to every veteran group on the West Coast. He paused. That's either brilliant or it's grounds for a competency review, and I'm still deciding which. "It's both," Harper said, "and you know it. Someone's been selling information about operators, dead ones specifically, on markets we can't easily access. They listed Valkyrie 3 weeks ago as confirmed deceased, safe credentials for anyone wanting to build a false background. That means someone with access to files they shouldn't have is trading secrets, and they're getting sloppy because they think dead operators can't bite back." Cross's jaw tightened. "You could have reported through channels. Let us handle it." "I did report it 6 months ago. The investigation stalled because whoever's leaking has good operational security and better patience. They weren't making mistakes." Harper's voice dropped even lower. "So, I became a mistake they couldn't ignore. I made myself visible in exactly the way that would force them to react. Either they try to use the information they stole, or they panic and make contact with whoever they're selling to, or they do nothing and watch their credibility crater when word spreads that Valkyrie's alive and buying beer at the Anchor." "And if they decide to handle you directly?" Cross asked. "If they send someone to make sure their information stays accurate? Then we have them on attempted murder of a federal operator, and we can work backwards from there." Harper's tone suggested she'd considered this outcome and found it acceptable. "I'm harder to kill than paperwork suggests." Cross exhaled through his nose, a sound caught between frustration and grudging respect. "You're going to give me an ulcer. You know that, right? This entire operation, if we can even call it an operation, is so far outside protocol that I'm going to need to invent new forms just to document it. Document it after we catch them." Harper shifted on her stool, angling slightly to keep both Cross and the rest of the bar in her peripheral vision. "Right now, you need to verify my identity publicly enough that word spreads, but quietly enough that we don't completely burn my cover. These people need to know I'm real, but they also need to think I'm vulnerable, that I'm exposed, that this was an accident and not a trap. You're asking me to salute you in front of 40 witnesses. I'm asking you to do your job, sir, which includes confirming when a protected operator's identity has been compromised and managing the fallout according to established security protocols." Harper's voice carried no trace of manipulation, just statement of fact. "The protocols exist for exactly this situation. Follow them. Let everyone see you follow them. That makes this real in a way that secret meetings and encrypted channels never could." Cross studied her for 3 full seconds, long enough that conversations around the bar started to die down again, as people noticed the intensity of whatever was passing between them. Then he straightened, shoulders going back in a movement Harper recognized because she'd done it herself 10,000 times. The shift from person to position, from individual to institution. "Stand up, please," Cross said, voice carrying now, projecting to reach every corner of the bar. Harper slid off the stool with the kind of balance that didn't require thought or adjustment. She stood at a modified position of attention, Not full military bearing because she was in civilian clothes and technically off duty, but enough structure to show respect for what was happening. Her hands stayed visible, relaxed at her sides. No threat, but also no submission. Cross set his tablet on the bar, screen still glowing with whatever file he'd been reading. Then he did something that made Derek gasp, and Jenny dropped the glass she'd been holding, and Aaron closed his eyes like he was witnessing something he'd hoped to never see. Commander Nathan Cross came to attention and rendered a salute. Not a casual acknowledgement, not a courtesy between officers of equal rank. A full, proper salute with the kind of precision that said this mattered, that the woman standing in front of him in jeans and a hoodie deserved the same respect he'd give an admiral in dress whites. His hand locked at his brow, elbow at the perfect 90-degree angle, fingers together and extended, thumb along the seam of his hand. The bar erupted in whispers that grew to normal speech, that grew to something close to chaos as 40 people tried to process what they were seeing. A senior naval intelligence officer saluting a civilian woman in a bar was impossible. It violated every protocol they knew, unless she wasn't a civilian. Unless everything she'd said was true and they'd just spent the last 30 minutes attacking someone who'd earned honors most of them couldn't imagine. Harper returned the salute with the same precision, the same respect, holding it for the regulation 2 seconds before dropping her hand back to her side. Cross held his position another beat, then dropped his own hand and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Your identity has been verified through proper channels. I apologize for any inconvenience this situation has caused. Your status remains protected under federal security protocols, and anyone who compromises that status will face prosecution under applicable laws. He turned to address the room. This operator is under federal protection. The conversation that occurred here tonight is now classified. You will not discuss this woman, her identity, or anything you witnessed. You will not share information about her through any channel, public or private. Violation of these directives will result in federal charges. Is that understood? Silence. The kind of silence that came from people realizing they'd stepped into something way over their heads and the water was still rising. Jenny nodded first, sharp and certain. Aaron gave a small gesture of acknowledgement from his position near the wall. Others followed, a cascade of agreement spreading through the crowd like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Derek looked like he might be sick. He pushed away from the pool table, took 3 steps toward Harper, then stopped when Cross shifted positions slightly to interpose himself. I didn't know, Derek said, voice stripped of all the earlier bravado. I swear, I didn't know. The coin, the call sign. You thought you were protecting something you believed in. Harper's tone carried no anger, no vindication, just statement of fact. You thought you were stopping someone from disrespecting a sacrifice you considered sacred. That's what you were supposed to think. It's what anyone would think in your position. But Derek's voice cracked. I called you a fraud. I grabbed for you. I posted that video. I told everyone. You did exactly what I needed you to do. Harper cut through his building spiral with surgical precision. You made this real. You made it spread. You created exactly the situation that needed to exist for this to work. She paused. Let that sink in. I'm not angry, Derek. I'm grateful. You played your part perfectly. He stared at her, trying to parse whether she was being sincere or just professionally kind. Cross cleared his throat, drawing attention back. The video that was shared has been flagged for deletion by platform security. Anyone who saved copies needs to delete them now, voluntarily, before this becomes a criminal matter rather than an operational security concern. More nodding, more silent acknowledgement. Briggs came back inside, gave Cross a subtle hand signal that meant perimeter was secure, and no additional complications had arrived. Cross picked up his tablet, locked the screen, and tucked it back into his messenger bag with movements so casual they had to be deliberate performance. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me for debriefing. Standard procedure when cover is compromised. He said it for the room's benefit, maintaining the fiction that Harper was now in some kind of official custody. We'll arrange secure transport and documentation. Of course, sir. Harper's response was textbook, respectful, compliant, exactly what someone in her supposed position should say. She turned toward the bar, pulled out cash to cover her tab plus a tip large enough to be memorable, and set it down next to the coin that had started everything. Derek moved again, faster this time, closing distance before Cross could intercept. But he wasn't aggressive. He was surrendering. He picked up the challenge coin with hands that shook slightly, held it out to Harper with both palms up, like he was offering something sacred. "This belongs to you. I'm sorry I touched it. I'm sorry I questioned." Harper took the coin, felt the familiar weight, the edge where she dinged it against the frame of a helicopter door during exfil from a situation that officially never happened. She held it for a moment, turning it in the light, then did something that made Derek's eyes go wide. She pressed it back into his hands, folding his fingers around it. "Keep it. Consider it a reminder that things aren't always what they look like, and jumping to conclusions can make you miss what's actually happening." She paused. "Also consider it an apology for putting you through this. You got used tonight, and that's not fair even if it was necessary." "I can't." Derek looked at the coin like it might burn through his skin. "This is yours. This is your unit, your number, your—" "It's a coin," Harper said gently. "Metal and meaning. The meaning is in what it represents, not in who holds it. You hold that, you remember tonight, and next time someone walks into a bar and things don't add up the way you expect, maybe you wait an extra 30 seconds before you decide you know the whole story." Derek's throat worked as he swallowed hard. He closed his fist around the coin, pulled it against his chest like he was protecting something fragile. "Thank you. Thank you." Harper nodded once, then turned back to Cross, who was watching the interaction with an expression that suggested he was filing away every detail for the report he'd have to write later. Together they moved toward the door, Harper's gait unhurried, still maintaining that careful balance between visible and invisible, someone who could walk through a crowd and be remembered or forgotten, depending on what the situation required. Aaron intercepted them 3 steps from the exit. He didn't speak to Harper directly, instead addressing Cross. "Sir, for what it's worth, I observed nothing tonight that suggested improper conduct by any party. A woman had a drink, there was a misunderstanding, it was resolved through proper channels. That's my official statement if anyone asks." Cross gave him a look that was mostly gratitude with a thin layer of professional distance. "Your discretion is noted and appreciated, Sergeant Major. Force Recon," Aaron corrected mildly. "Retired, but the principles are the same." He finally looked at Harper, met her eyes with the kind of recognition that came from shared experience across different services and different decades. "Stay safe out there, Valkyrie. Whatever you're hunting, I hope you catch it." "Thank you," Harper said. 2 words that carried weight they hadn't earned yet, but would eventually, once the operation played out and the people who thought that they could profit from selling dead operators' identities found out how wrong they'd been. The night air outside hit cold enough to make Harper's breath visible. The parking lot was mostly empty except for Cross' vehicle, a nondescript sedan that screamed Federal Motor Pool, and the shore patrol truck where Briggs was probably documenting the most unusual night of his career. Cross led Harper away from both, toward the corner of the lot where darkness pooled thick enough to provide privacy. "That was theatrical," he said once they were far enough away that voices wouldn't carry. "It had to be." Harper's breath came in clouds that dissipated quickly in the breeze rolling off the ocean. "Whoever's selling information needs to believe this was a genuine accident. They need to think I got careless, that the coin falling was real, that I panicked and claimed my call sign because I'm rusty and made a mistake. If they think this was intentional bait, they'll go underground and we'll lose the thread." Cross pulled out his phone, checked something, then showed Harper the screen. It displayed a dark web marketplace, the kind that required specialized browsers and cryptocurrency to access. The listing for Valkyrie credentials was still active, but the comment section below it had exploded in the last 20 minutes. Arguments about whether the bar incident was real, speculation about whether the listing was fraudulent, demands for refunds from people who had already purchased the information. "They're panicking," Cross said. "Look at this one." He pointed to a comment from the seller, timestamp showing it was posted 8 minutes ago. "Claims the incident is fake, says they have confirmation Valkyrie is deceased. Offers to provide additional documentation to prove their credibility." Which means they're either going to run or they're going to reach out to whoever gave them the information in the first place to verify their source is still solid. Harper's voice carried satisfaction. "Either way, they move. They make contact. They leave traces we can follow. You're assuming they're not smart enough to just cut losses and disappear. I'm assuming they're greedy enough and proud enough to want to prove they weren't wrong." Harper watched the comments section refresh, new messages appearing almost faster than she could read them. People who sell secrets don't have normal risk assessment. They're in it for money, but they're also in it for the power trip, being the person who knows things other people don't, who can provide access other people can't. Someone like that doesn't walk away when their credibility gets questioned. They double down. They prove themselves. They make mistakes. Cross pocketed his phone. You have 72 hours. After that, the operational security concerns become bigger than the investigation benefits, and I have to pull you back into protective custody for real. 72 hours is plenty. Harper turned toward the street, toward the bus stop where she'd arrived hours ago with a plan that was now in motion and couldn't be stopped even if she wanted to. They'll make contact within 24. Try to verify their source, make sure their information is still good. When they do, we'll have a direction to follow instead of just shadows. And if they send someone to eliminate the problem, Cross asked, if they decide the easiest way to restore their credibility is to make sure Valkyrie actually is deceased. Harper looked back at him, and for just a moment, the careful neutral expression she'd maintained all night slipped enough to show what lay underneath. Something cold and patient and utterly certain. Then they'll find out why I earned that call sign in the first place, and we'll have them on attempted murder instead of just information trafficking. Either way, we win. Cross sighed, the sound of a man who knew he was watching something unfold that would either be brilliant or catastrophic with very little middle ground. Check in every 6 hours. Encrypted channel only. If you miss a check-in, I'm sending a team. Understood, sir? And Harper? Cross waited until she looked at him again. That thing you did in there, giving Derek the coin. That was good. That was the kind of thing that turns a story people might question into a legend they'll tell for 20 years. You just created an evangelist. Someone who will defend your reputation without even realizing he's doing it. Harper's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she'd considered that outcome and found it useful. Legends are tools like anything else, sir. Sometimes the best weapon is the story people tell about you after you leave. She walked away then, hands in her hoodie pocket, posture relaxed, just another civilian heading home after a Friday night drink. Within 3 steps, she'd become unremarkable again, the kind of person eyes would slide past without registering. Cross watched until she'd turned the corner and disappeared from sight, then pulled out his phone and started making calls to people who didn't officially exist, reporting situations that would never appear in any public record. If this story gave you chills, hit that thanks button to support more content like this. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that silence can be the strongest weapon. And subscribe, because Harper's mission isn't over. Inside the anchor, the atmosphere had shifted into something strange and charged. People spoke in hushed voices, comparing notes, trying to piece together exactly what had happened and what it meant. Jenny had locked the door and flipped the sign to closed, establishing the kind of secure perimeter that would let people process without worrying about outside interference. Derek sat at the bar with the challenge coin in front of him, staring at it like he could divine truth from metal if he looked hard enough. Aaron had joined him, 2 warriors from different eras and different services, bound now by witnessing something neither could fully explain to anyone who hadn't been there. I grabbed her shoulder, Derek said quietly. I reached for her. I was going to physically turn her around and demand answers. And she moved. I didn't even see her move, but suddenly she was 3 feet away and I was grabbing air. How did she do that? Training, Aaron replied. Thousands of hours of training. The kind you get when disappearing from grabbing range might mean the difference between mission success and captive situation. He took a sip from his beer, which had gone warm, but nobody seemed to care. You want to know the really impressive part? She could have broken your wrist, could have dropped you on the floor before you realized you were falling, could have turned that moment into something ugly that would have ruined her whole operation, but she didn't. She just moved. That's control most people never achieve. I called her a fraud, Derek said, voice hollow. I called her a thief. I told everyone. You did what anyone would do, what you were supposed to do. Jenny's voice came from behind the bar where she was methodically cleaning glasses that were already clean. She said it herself. You played your part. Whatever operation she's running, whatever she's trying to accomplish, we were all part of it, whether we knew it or not. The woman with the sergeant major bearing spoke up from her table. The thing that gets me is the breathing. Did anyone else notice? 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count out. Combat breathing. Stress management technique. They teach for situations where you need to stay calm while everything's going to pieces around you. She was doing it the whole time. That's not something you fake. That's not something you learn from movies. That's drilled in response from actual experience. The grip, Aaron added. The way she held the beer bottle, index finger extended along the neck, perfect balance, ready to use it as a weapon or set it down without thinking. That's operator muscle memory. I've seen it before, but never that clean, never that unconscious. She wasn't performing, she was just existing, and the training was so deep it was part of how she existed. Around the room, others chimed in with details they'd noticed. The way Harper had positioned herself to see both exits. The way she'd tracked everyone's movement without obviously watching. The way she'd answered questions with minimal information, forcing people to fill in blanks with their own assumptions. Each observation added another layer to the picture they were collectively building, trying to understand what they'd witnessed and what it meant. "I need to apologize," someone said from near the pool table. The young man who'd been recording, who'd posted the first video, stepped forward with the kind of body language that said he expected punishment. "I posted that video. I said things that, if she's really who she says she is, if she really is Valkyrie, then You did your civic duty," Jenny cut him off. "You saw what you thought was stolen valor. You reported it. That's what you're supposed to do. The system worked. Shore Patrol came. Someone with clearance verified. Situation got resolved. That's how it's supposed to happen." "But You followed protocol," Aaron said firmly. "You didn't attack. You didn't make threats. You documented what you saw and reported it through channels. That's textbook correct response. The fact that the situation turned out to be more complicated than it looked doesn't change the fact that you did everything right." The young man nodded slowly, not quite convinced, but willing to accept the explanation because the alternative, that he'd publicly attacked a genuine operator with legitimate credentials, was too horrifying to process fully. He returned to his table, pulled out his phone, and started the process of deleting everything he'd saved, trusting that the copies he'd made would cause more problems than keeping them would solve. Derek turned the coin over in his hands, feeling the weight, the serial number etched into the edge. "She gave this to me. Why would she do that? This is hers. This means something to her. Why would she give it to someone who treated her like—" "Because legends don't need physical proof," Aaron said quietly. "Because she's confident enough in who she is that she doesn't need a piece of metal to validate her identity. And because she just made you into someone who will defend her story without even realizing you're doing it. 5 years from now, you'll be in a bar somewhere, someone will mention Valkyrie, and you'll tell this story. You'll show them that coin. You'll have physical evidence that backs up your account. And because you were the skeptic who got converted, your testimony will carry more weight than if you'd believed from the start." Derek's eyes widened as the implication hit. "She played me. She played everyone," Jenny corrected, "but she played us in a way that turned us from threats into assets. That's the kind of strategic thinking that keeps people alive in situations where tactical superiority isn't enough." She set down the glass she'd been cleaning and leaned on the bar. "I've been running this place for 12 years. I've seen hundreds of veterans, active duty, contractors, every flavor of military and adjacent. I've spotted dozens of frauds, called out stolen valor, protected this community from people trying to profit from sacrifices they didn't make. And tonight, a real operator walked in and let me treat her like a threat because it served a larger purpose. That's humbling, in a way I'm still processing." The conversations continued, circles of people comparing observations and theories, building collective understanding from individual pieces. Nobody left. Nobody seemed to want to leave, as if stepping out into the normal world would break the spell of what they'd witnessed and reduce it to something ordinary that could be dismissed or forgotten. Outside, 3 blocks away, Harper Kane stood at a bus stop checking her phone. The dark web marketplace had exploded further, the seller now offering full refunds and trying to delete the original listing before more damage occurred. But the internet never forgot, and screenshots were already circulating, the seller's credibility destroyed beyond repair. More importantly, buried in the comment chaos, Harper spotted what she'd been looking for. A message from a different username, newer account, asking the original seller to contact them privately because they had information about the Coronado incident that might help restore credibility. The writing style was different, more formal, more careful, but the interest was genuine. That was the thread. That was the connection between the marketplace seller and whoever was actually providing the classified information. Someone watching the chaos and trying to manage damage control, trying to protect their revenue stream and their reputation. Someone who would make contact, exchange information, and in doing so, create a trail that could be followed backward to wherever the leak originated. Harper sent a quick encrypted message to Cross. Hook set, fish is circling, will maintain position and wait for bite. The response came back in seconds. Acknowledged, support on standby, don't get eaten. She smiled slightly, pocketed the phone, and boarded the arriving bus. Tomorrow would bring developments. The person who would message the seller would make contact, would try to verify whether Valkyrie was actually alive, would reach into their network of sources and ask questions that would create ripples in systems designed to detect exactly those kinds of inquiries. And when they did, Harper would be waiting with patience that came from years of learning that sometimes the best action was perfect stillness. The bus rolled through San Diego's night streets, carrying Harper toward a safe house that didn't appear on any rental database, past neighborhoods where people lived normal lives that didn't involve federal investigations or classified identities or operations that required using yourself as bait. She watched the city slide past the window, thought about Derek holding that coin like it was holy, thought about Jenny learning that even 12 years of vigilance couldn't prepare you for every situation, thought about Aaron recognizing muscle memory that transcended service branch and generation. She'd created something tonight that would ripple outward in ways she couldn't entirely control. Stories would spread through veteran communities, through military networks, through the informal channels where people shared information too sensitive or too strange for official discussion. Some stories would get details wrong, some would embellish, some would question whether it really happened at all, but the core would remain. Valkyrie was alive, Valkyrie was operating, and Valkyrie was hunting something important enough that she'd blown her own cover in a public bar in front of 40 witnesses just to flush it into the open. That story, that legend, would serve purposes Harper hadn't even planned yet, would create opportunities and complications in equal measure, would become a tool she could use or a problem she'd have to manage, depending on how the next 72 hours unfolded. The bus reached her stop. Harper exited, walked 4 blocks in a direction that wouldn't take her directly to the safe house, doubled back twice to check for surveillance, then finally approached the unremarkable building that would be home until the operation concluded or went catastrophically wrong. Inside, she made coffee strong enough to strip paint, pulled out a laptop that existed in no purchase record anywhere, and began reviewing the operation parameters for what would happen next. Somewhere out there, someone who thought they could profit from selling secrets about dead operators was starting to panic, starting to make mistakes, starting to leave traces that would eventually lead Harper right to them. And when she found them, they'd learn that some ghosts came back for revenge wearing jeans and a hoodie, carrying nothing but patience and the willingness to wait as long as necessary for justice to arrive. Outside, the San Diego night continued in its normal rhythms, oblivious to the fact that somewhere in its midst, a legend had just come back from the dead with unfinished business and 72 hours to complete it.